Hey guys, this is Bart from Crush Live Poker. On YouTube today, we're going to put out a full-length training video, which is a culmination of hands across two different videos. This is very typical of what you will see in our no-limit cash game training over on Crush Live Poker, specifically for mid to lower stakes live poker. And this was a review of hands played at Jacksonville Best Bet in the video. All right, next hand here comes from a couple minutes later on, and we're going to take a look and we're going to see King Queen off here from this dude in the orange from seat number 4, Gore. So he's from +1 with a 526 stack. So he's going to open it up here for 10, which is obviously fairly standard. So you can see like the 5x raise. Now you're going to see sort of low stakes, loose calls here. Obviously never V-pipping Jack 6 of hearts here from this guy's perspective from the hijack. You got an overcall here from the cutoff with 9-4 suited, and then you have 9-8 of diamonds here on the button, and he's going to 3-bet it up here to 30. I mean, the easiest thing to say about 3-bet sizing, and I know the stacks are definitely, I would say, very, very sort of restricted here, is you can just go 4x plus the dead calls, or if you want to go smaller, 3x plus the dead calls. But this would warrant a 3-bet of at least 50 if you're expecting to see some sort of fold equity. Because you're not trying to make a juice or raise here. I mean, yeah, you have position, but ideally, if you made it 60 or 70, you actually put a lot of pressure on the pre-flop raiser. And to be honest with you, King Queen off should just be a fold. I don't mind the idea of squeezing, especially when you're seeing a bunch of loose calls in between, like with guys with like Jack 6 or 9-4 suited, but make it a real 3-bet size. So he's going to make it 30. I mean, the only time I would really size down like this is if the effective stacks were just unbelievably short and I wanted action with like aces. And basically everybody's going to call. Even to a 3x 3-bet, Gore playing King Queen off here from the spot probably in theory should be a 4-bet or fold. And you might actually hop on the fact that the 3-bet sizing was so small that it can never really be a real hand. And I wouldn't actually mind throwing in a occasional 4-bet bluff. But again, you know, you're going to be dealing with very, very shallow SPRs later on. So we're going to go to the flop here, obviously 4 ways, and 9-8 suited is the pre-flop 3-better. Interesting flop here, as you can see, that Jack 6 suited flops a flush draw. We got King Queen here. The guy Gore has top. And Letty here has an open-ended straight draw. But even in a 3-bet pot, I would almost say like this might be like akin to a single raise pot. Like if you can sort of imagine these 3 guys limping in and we decided to raise on the button. And I think it's probably pretty close because I always go with that sort of approach where usually I'll over limp with playable hands when say like more than 2 people have limped in, and I usually only raise hands that I would raise from the first few spots with. For example, like 9-8 suited is probably pretty close. But if you looked at this and we raised it and we got 3 limp callers, I might not c-bet this flop. I don't really expect to get a lot of folds. I might just take a card here. And that's how I would kind of approach this particular spot here as well. I just don't see the folds that are really going to come through here. You could make a case maybe with a backdoor diamond draw. Like if that 7 was a diamond, you could maybe try to go for a triple barrel, knowing that probably someone's going to be capped at King Queen when everyone's raising sort of Ace King pre-flop. So I don't mind here the check behind, to be honest with you, with 9-8 of diamonds on this particular texture. So we go to the turn, and the turn's an 8. By the way, if there had been a bet on the flop, Jack 9 would have been double gutted, which is a hand that someone would call the flop with. They would now make a straight, but of course we don't know because people are entirely, they check to the pre-flop raiser. It's interesting, TB here now turns a gutter here to a 9 with his flush draw, and Gore, who is the original pre-flop raiser, has top pair. Hey guys, it's that time of year again. It is Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and CrushLivePoker.com is offering 30% off of all plan levels, including the already heavily discounted yearly elite subscription level. All you have to do is click on the link in the description to get this deep, deep discount. And we have a new exciting feature and a new course to announce. We have the Bart Bot. This has been in the works for the better part of a year. You can ask the Bart Bot any question about poker, and it will point you exactly where to go in our vast library of content with time codes. It's going to be a great way to really maximize your study time. And we have also dropped a new course, the Blueprint to Crush Live Poker. Check it out over at CrushLivePoker.com. If I'm Gore, I'm probably going to bet here. And it's just going to be like a really, really robust like bet fold strategy here at this level. I just can't stress it enough. You're going to get called by worse. And usually when someone raises, they're going to have better. So he comes out and he bets 45 here. And this guy TB with his draw is going to make the call. It would be interesting if he maybe once in a while threw in a raise, and that would actually be believable. I think you have to look at the pre-flop setup here. Everyone is naturally checking to the pre-flop 3-better. So TB is entirely unknown. He could have flopped a set. He could have flopped like King 10. He could have Jack 9. As opposed to if the pre-flop raiser had checked in front of him and he had checked back on the flop, then it becomes a little bit less believable. But here, he could definitely throw in a semi-bluff raise. Now, who knows if someone's going to come off of a king or not, but it definitely has some merit in consideration, and I might throw it in there once in a while. Now, it gets over here to Jay, who shouldn't even really be in the hand. I mean, I realize he's getting almost 5-1 on his money, but his draw is very, very transparent here. He can also be on the ass end of it once in a while, like if a jack were to come. He makes the call, and then he gets over to the pre-flop 3-better, who's getting even better odds with pair and a straight draw, and he makes the call as well, which I think at that point is fine. Just sort of proceed with caution. So now the pot's going to be like $350, and this is probably the most interesting river or part of the hand for me, I think. The river comes out, and it's an offsuit 3. So here's my question to you if you are Gore. If you get checked to here, now remember, Gore is the one that's out of position. It got checked around on the flop. He bet the turn. No one raised. Now, you would think that 2-pair plus is going to be doing a lot of raising, especially against the guy that's not the pre-flop raiser. Maybe somebody might just call with like 7-8 or 10-8 or something like that. But this is the biggest brick in the deck. And this is why I like to go for a lot of thin value. I think this is a value bet here on this river based upon the flop and the turn action. I think you have the pre-flop raiser almost always beat, which he does. And there's a chance that somebody might call you with a 10, and they're certainly going to call you with a weaker king. Remember the configuration. Everybody here checked to the pre-flop raiser. So TB and J could have like a hand like King Jack, King 9, something like that. I assume Gore is checking to check call, but that's just never going to happen. I just don't think anybody's going to bluff at it in this spot. Once he bets turn and then checks river, he's kind of announced that he's check calling. So it's just better to go for value yourself. But it doesn't surprise me that he doesn't. That's why you can make a lot of hero calls at this level if someone were to bet in Gore's spot again, because here we see he's checking king queen. So if he were to bet, if he's not betting king queen, he almost becomes inherently polarized anyways to like 2-pair plus straights, because we know he's not betting king queen. That's the whole thing. Not shocking that he checks. None of these guys bluff at it. And of course, the pre-flop 3-better just checks behind. And I think king queen probably should have come out and bet like 125 there. Obviously, the guys in the middle would have folded. I don't know what Letty would have done, but it's still a value bet. Just because the guys in the middle had draws that missed doesn't mean that they can't have hands that would call Gore. But that is definitely empirical evidence about how when people bet rivers at the small stakes, they become inherently polar. Okay, moving along here a few minutes to the next hand here. And I don't know if this was like some sort of misread or what, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second, but this is actually a button straddle, and that means that it's going to go in order in Jacksonville. Sometimes they do it differently, but here it went in order, meaning the blinds actually went first, and they actually did fold out. But I think the button straddle was only at a 5 here too. So we get this guy from +1 off of a 374 stack. He's going to raise it up to 13. That's why we see the larger raise sizing here. And he's going to get action from Gore, who is on the button straddle with 8-6 of hearts. I think that's a reasonable call, especially heads up. I mean, it could bring in, obviously, the big blind here limped. So it went limp for 5. Letty raised to 13. So that is kind of small. Gore called. You could definitely make a case for sometimes 3-betting to drive the limper out. Calling, I think, sometimes is fine too if you know what you're doing post-flop. I think folding's out of the question for $8 more with position. And we go to the flop here, it's $41. And the board comes out king, queen, 9 with a couple hearts. Now, if you ever want a definition of a dry flush draw, this is one of them for sure. With 8-6 of hearts, dry flush draw. and of course this is over in CLP terms, just means like dry flush draw just means it's a low flush draw without any possibility of making a better hand or a second best hand besides the flush. Like sometimes you can have a flush draw and an overcard, that's on a dry flush draw, or flush draw and a pair, or flush draw and a gut shot. But here, 8-6 of hearts really, I mean, I guess it can make the bottom end of the ass end of a straight, but it's just really looking to hit a flush. That's really the only way that it can win for the most part. Now, the big blind checks, and you can see both these guys share top pair. Letty here is going to bet 25. Now, this is what I was talking about where I thought that this was a little bit of a misread. I think you have to call here. I mean, I know you do have a guy behind you, but it's not PLO. I mean, it's Hold'em. Sure, there is a chance that you might be over flush. Take a look at the distribution of the suits, though. The king and the 9 are out there. So obviously you lose to like the ace and the jack, but I think you have to peel here getting almost 3-1. If you're going to play the hand pre-flop, I just don't understand how you'd possibly fold. That's why I wondered, could it possibly have been a misread? And now TB is going to check call. So both players here with top pair and a gut shot, pot's $91. Turn here is a 6. By the way, the 8-6 of hearts would have picked up a pair now. And we're going to see it quickly go check, check. Now, if I'm Letty here on this type of texture, first of all, I probably would have sized up a little more. He ended, what did he bet? He bet 25 into 41 on the flop. I mean, I know that there's a straight out there, but these are the types of boards that you're going to get called. Remember, just two high cards and 2 flush boards, you can bet larger. Usually the theory is without a straight out there, but even still with King Jack, I'm probably still going to bet. But the point here, though, is on the turn, I don't know why he stopped betting. Again, bread and butter, like sort of CLP, there's so many draws that can call you. The chances that that guy in the big blind has ace king is almost nil, right? Because he limp overcalled. He didn't limp re-raise, he limp overcalled. So throw out ace king. King queen is very unlikely just because of the check call on the flop. And, you know, somehow if he hits like king 6 or queen 6, you're probably going to hear from him on the turn. But I would not let off a free card here with king jack. I'm going to continue to bet for value and then evaluate the river. I might even go 3 streets if we get like a black brick type of run out. But again, typically at this stakes, it goes quickly check, check. And then there's a lot of action killing cards. And there's the heart. By the way, the 8-6 of hearts guy would have obviously made the flush. And now this usually is going to shut everything down. But the other thing, though, too, is after I check back turn and then the guy checks the river. So it went check, check on turn, then up front checks the river. I still would probably value bet. If I checked back the turn and then the heart came and then he checked the river, I still think I'm going to value bet. I'm going to get 1 street somewhere. And of course, once in a while, you might value own yourself against like a 2-pair type of hand that made 2-pair on the turn and now he's scared of the flush, but that's fine. Remember, one of the key ways to like increase your win rate is to make thin value bets. All you have to do is get called more than 50% of the time if you're betting for value with worse. And I think that definitely would have happened, but I would have bet the turn here for sure. This comes from about 45 minutes into the live stream. And you can see here, Gore, once again, from +2 is going to open it up to 12. I mean, obviously that's fine. He's just using like a little bit of a larger open size. Sometimes you can actually make the game a little bit bigger by opening to like 15. I mean, I would probably do that as the stacks get much, much deeper. This is why I talk about if you want to move up, you know, serious money starts to be made like usually at the $5 blind level. Now, obviously it can be different depending on the rake structure and things like that. When you open to like more than say 4x, the short stacks can play so tight. They have no incentive. This isn't an anti-game. So if you're in a splashy game and you're sort of short stacking, taking a shot at the next level, you can absolutely print because you can just fold every single hand if people are opening to either too wide and also too large of a sizing. So he opens here to 12. He's going to get a call here on the button. This guy has absolutely no business, obviously, being in this hand with the 8-9 off. This should just be a fold. And they're going to go heads up here to the flop, which is $28. So 7-6 suited here is the opener, and the button has flatted. So I would definitely c-bet this flop for sure. I mean, obviously it would be slightly better if there was 1 spade out there. And again, this kind of goes to the small stakes exploit, although it might not even play on this particular board that you should be doing more I think sometimes more of a volume of betting with your good hands, and that includes your good draws sometimes as well, where there can be certain GTO or optimal scenarios where you're supposed to check 100 on any board. That's out the window. And I think a lot of like loose, small stakes live games. So he is going to make a C bet, and he bets 15. I mean, that's like half the size of the pot. But you will see this, like, especially if he were to bet 10, when you're at the small stakes and you take an actual 1/3 sizing on a board where everybody else is like betting larger with their good hands, and you bet like 10, you will get a lot of bullshit floats. A lot of bullshit floats. And that's exactly what's gonna happen here. And that's why I say that a lot of times if you use small sizing in position as a C bet, and then you check back the turn, you have to do a lot of hero calling on the river with any type of showdown value, because the guy from out of position is going to be calling with a lot of kind of garbage that he should not be calling with because of the small sizing. So he bets 15 here, and Jay is on the button with 9-8 off. I mean, why he's calling, I have no idea. So it's 58 to the turn. Turn is a jack. Now, here's the thing about these wheel boards. So if I were to bet 7-6 here and took the sizing for what I did, and I start to think about like what my opponent's range is, I think you're actually going to see a lot of ace X hands here, especially the way that people construct like their extra portion of the hands that they play pre-flop that they shouldn't, like when they're at bet like 30-40% VPIP. And any ace X here, like ace 9 off, ace 8, something like that, is 2 overcards and a wheel draw. So I would absolutely have that in my mind. And this is why I actually love this hand from Gore to probably triple barrel off, because if you get these disconnected high cards, they're really, really hard. They're really good for you, and it's going to be really hard for your opponent to really call down. Your opponent could have like king 4 suited, king deuce suited. Probably a 5 is like one of the best hands. And if he's not going to raise you by the turn, you know he's probably only going to get one pair. So this is a great double barrel card. Any card here, I think a 9 or above, is a great double barrel card here, with the exception of like an ace. But like a 9 through a king, I think is a mandatory double barrel card. And this is where playing hands like this, raising them from up front and not playing them well post flop just becomes a leak. Then he probably shouldn't play this hand because he checks. And now you get into a situation here where Jay is going to bet, and he's going to bet 35. This is a little bit kind of like using variable turn sizing, but he's betting a little bit larger, where you're going to bet with some protection, you're going to bet with some slow plays, and you're going to bet with some of your sort of light floats, although 9-8 should never even be in there. So he bets 35, and Gore is just going to go into a check call shell with his draw, which is, I just think, really bad. It's really passive poker, because if he just misses, he has no showdown value, whereas he could bet and get a wide sort of range of hands to fold out. But I would plan on triple barreling this hand if I were him from up front. River's a 9, and it brings in a backdoor flush, so 7-6 just misses. And obviously now Jay picks up a 9, so he doesn't think that he needs to really bluff at it, so he just checks it back. It would have been interesting, though, if like the river was a 10 or something like that. Now, obviously Gore couldn't call, but what I keep trying to stress about how people are really polar at these stakes, if it came out Jack 10 and the hand went down the same way, where this guy bet 7-6 and the guy on the button called, and then he checked and then the guy on the button bet 35 and Gore called, and the river's a 10 and Gore checked, and then the guy on the button bet again. So the guy on the button called the flop, bet the turn when checked to, and then the river's an offsuit 10. You check, the guy on the button bets. What is he betting on this board? Now, he can have some very, very thick value that was slow playing off on the flop, or some sort of weird 2-pair like Jack 4. But I think on a high disconnected run out, like a offsuit Jack, offsuit 10, this is where I keep talking about, like, it's polar. It's to 2-pair plus. Like, he's not betting like 6-5 here at the end. So that comes into play with that small stakes exploit when you turn this around and you're in position that you have to call down with any type of showdown value after you check the turn, after c-betting the flop, and then you check back the turn in position and disconnected high cards run out. So, for example, if you flip the positions around and Gore bet the flop and Jay called from out of position, and then for some reason Gore didn't barrel the turn, say he had like ace queen or something like that, and now the river was a 10, and now Jay comes out and bets from out of position, what is he betting? That is my question. What is he betting? That's what gets to that small stakes exploit that can be very, very profitable. I would be finding a lot of calls with ace queen if that was the scenario here. Obviously, Jay doesn't need to bet, and it just goes check, check. Okay, couple of hands after that last hand. This is actually going to be a 3-bet pot, and it's going to be a 3-bet pot with garbage. So there's going to be kind of a lot of very, very questionable play pre-flop. It starts with Evan limping in here from +2 with ace-3 offsuit. TB is going to raise with 10-3 suited, a call from Jay. And remember Letty, who had 3-bet the 8-9 suited here, he's going to find the squeeze with 9s, which definitely is the play. But again, his sizing is just off. He 3-bets it up here to 46, really kind of on the small side. I think I would be making it 60 as a minimum. And that's going to bring in here TB, and it's also going to bring in Jay here as well. And just keep, thinking about what I keep saying over and over again in terms of like river play and how c-bet sizing plays into different things and polarity. So they both call 10-3 suited and 8-deuce suited. And we're going to go to a flop here, and you can see the pot is $144 to the flop. So already the pot gets very, very bloated here for Letty. And it comes out king 10-7 here. And I just think that this is probably burning money if you c-bet here. I mean, I know this board is somewhat good for you, but you just don't really have the stack depth to like run a multiple barrel. I mean, I suppose you could make a case for making a very, very small c-bet just for a little bit of equity protection. Like I might do that heads up, but I think against 2 players here on this type of connected board, I think I'm probably just going to check this one back. He does make a very small bet though. And remember that. He bets 30 and he gets a call. So a very, very small bet and a call. I keep stressing about how you have to watch your bet size on the flop when you get into situations on the river, when you check back turns, especially blank turns. So bet and a call, turns of 4, that's a pretty big blank, except for the fact that it obviously brings a backdoor spade draw. You can see that TB had the best hand anyways, but this is a turn card that you're going to continue to bet with a king plus, especially in a 3-bet pot, right? For sure. You might be doing some double barreling with ace, queen, ace, jack, but you're definitely going to be betting a king plus here almost all the time on this turn card. The fact that Letty doesn't do that and that he used such small sizing on the flop leads to a situation where he must call down on the river fairly light. Now, I will say here that TB did call next to act with a guy behind him. So this is a little bit different than if you were heads up. Now, obviously, the backdoor flush has come in, and TB has made that backdoor flush. It is possible someone could have king X of spades, 10X of spades, straight draws with spades, things like that. But he is going to come out, and he's going to bet the river here. This is a case where he's not really going to bet all that large. Now, the bluff that's sort of missed here would be like a queen jack type of holding, jack 9 type of holding. It's kind of unfortunate for Letty that he probably has not the best hand to call down with because he has the 9 in his hand. So again, jack 9 double gutted and 8-9 are sort of these straight draw. You would say, well, are those hands into a 3-bet? Well, look what's in there to a 3-bet anyways. Probably the worst hand he could have here would be like 9s without a spade. It's slightly better that he has a spade in his hand just because he somewhat blocks, just very, very slightly, some of the flushes here. But the fact that he's got 2 9s in his hand actually kind of hurts him. But I just wanted to look at this setup where I would get pretty curious here. Now, I would probably fold because it's a 3-bet pot and because TB called with a guy behind him next to act on the flop, and he might be value betting a king. This is not that type of situation where disconnected high cards sort of roll off, but thought it was a pretty good little setup situation where you can understand what I'm talking about. So with the 2 9s in my hand in a 3-bet pot with this guy calling next to act, I'm most likely going to find the fold, and he finally did. This comes from 59 minutes into the show. And you can see we've got a button straddle going on here. So it's $4 to call. I think I had said 5 before. One time it was 5, but it's $4 to call. And you're going to see a raise here. Again, just the sizing. These guys are bringing it in usually for 10 off of 2-2, 10 to 13. And now all of a sudden you're just going to bring it in for 11 from the hijack. I mean, I would definitely raise queen jack off from the hijack, but make it a real raise. Now, from the cutoff with queen jack suited, I'm definitely three betting here. I am absolutely three betting. We talk about in a three blind format how you're incentivized to three bet. How about in a three blind format when the button is the one that's straddled and the opener raised so small that if you call, the button's pretty much going to VPip like every single hand. Now, he ended up not VPipping because he had 9 deuce off, but this should be a three bet all day long. From the cutoff, he chooses just to call, and that brings in Joe, who limped called from up front with deuce deuce, which, by the way, you can get away with some of the time. Usually we talk about sort of playing a solid game that you don't want to do a whole lot of upfront limping. If the game is very, very passive, and see, it was a straddled pot, so you're really not that deep. I was going to say if it's like 2-2 and like the stacks are like over 500 and it's commonly getting limped around, I think it's okay to sometimes limp with some small suited aces and some small pairs. What you don't want to do is limp with suited connectors. Medium to midish suited connectors like 5-6 suited, 6-7 suited from up front, that's a losing play. You definitely don't want to do that. Those are opens. They're mostly folds in a loose live game, but you can get away sometimes with calling or limp calling with small pairs from up front. TB did not 3-bet this hand. Remember, he just flatted. So he's flopped a pretty big hand here. He's got a combo draw here to a 9. If I was Evan and I'm going to... See, Evan doesn't have a club in his hand. I was going to say, if I'm going to check call, I might do some betting here too. It would be nice to have a club in my hand. It's probably pretty close. This is, again, one of those ones where, in theory, this very well might be a check 100, but I would never dream of checking like kings or aces on a board like this against these types of lineups. Check 100 being just because the board is better, hits like the field caller's range more so than your own. So TB starts with a bet here of 15 into about 40. Actually might, depending on the stack size, actually might size up just a tad so that I can barrel larger on some turns. There's just in the really good turns for TB here, actually, besides making his hand in the form of like a 9, a club, a queen, or a jack, and obviously a good turn card would be a king, but low bricks like 4 and below that aren't a club, I would just be hammering as well. So he bets 15, and Evan is going to check call again, not with a ton of showdown value if he misses. Kind of lean towards me wanting to play a little bit more aggressively and actually betting here if I was going to check call, and sometimes getting through the button too, giving yourself position. Even if the guy from up front had called, it wouldn't be a disaster, but good things can happen when you bet to get the guy to your left out. But he decides to check call. Definitely looks somewhat of a passive approach, turns the ace of clubs. And my question to you guys is, if you were TB and you played this hand in this manner, and you bet small on the flop, and the pre-flop raiser check called, what kind of hands do you think the pre-flop raiser has some of the time? I think it's going to be a lot of ace highs. Like he might peel with ace jack, ace queen, ace king, something like that. Now that TB has made his hand in the form of having the second nut flush, there is absolutely no way in the world I would ever dream of slow playing here when checked to me. Now, if you wanted to sometimes slow play, which I probably would never do in a game like this, it would be way better on a low club as opposed to this club, because you have to go back and think, what is the pre-flop raiser check calling with? Now, we can see he doesn't have anything. He actually turns a double gutter. By the way, for Evan, talking about like betting flop, if this guy just called, would I bet the turn? I think I probably would. And then he would probably raise and I would fold. But I mean, I would take one of these cards and bet with it because it gives me obviously a double gutter. Obviously, I would bet a king and low bricks. I know it's not the best because it's a club, but I still probably would. And you're going to get all 10x without a club to fold out. But this guy checks and he checks back. Come on, TB. Are you kidding me? So the river here is a 7. Evan doesn't really end up with anything. If it was any other card that didn't put a one-liner out there, I think Evan has to bluff at it. Because when the guy checks back the turn, he's going to have just like a lot of random like 8x, 10x types of pairs. And I think it's going to be hard for him to call after he checks back the river if he doesn't have an ace. The problem here for Evan, although I still think maybe you bet like a small amount, you just can't win. But the problem here is that you're just going to get called so much, I feel like, on a one-liner to a 9. Although if a guy just has like Jack 10 and you check call the flop, clubs come in and now you bet the river. It's really hard for that to call. So I think I might go with an approach if I'm Evan, even with the one-liner out here. It's kind of similar because it's a similar hand with the queen jack of probably just like under bluffing here, 25 or 30, getting a random sort of one pair type, like king 8 suited to like fold out. Because there's no way he can win, really. But the real travesty of this hand, though, is TB. I don't know why on earth he would ever check back turn. Now he bets 25 at the river. Now he shows it. Oh, I slow played. This is what you want to do to increase your win rate in live poker, like 100%. Again, we've got a straddled setup here. So it's going to get limped around. And like I said, this is the guy who I think played pretty solid. So the dude out of seat 3 is going to raise it up to 20. King, queen suited. Now he kind of made it small. I would probably go larger, probably 25 or 30. But okay, he raises it up to 20 just because you're making it 5x over 2 limps from out of position. It's a little bit small. You can see how wide these guys are calling. And he gets a couple customers here. So he's going to go 3 ways. And the pot is going to be $66. Okay, fair enough. We're going to go the flop here. And finally, we get top pair over top pair. So it's queen 5-6 with a couple clubs. And again, this is a situation where if I had ace queen, king queen in a limp pot, and definitely if I ever had an overpair, because that gives somebody more of a chance that they have a queen, I am just hoping for bricks and I can just take this hand for 3 streets. When you have the opportunity to take a 1 pair hand at the small stakes for 3 streets, when people are incapable of folding top pair, that will increase your win rate. And he's going to come out and he's going to bet. He's going to bet 35. Again, he could go larger if it was like, queen jack 3 with a 2 flush, something like that. The fact that he has a queen makes it less likely that somebody else has a queen, but we can see that somebody does. So he goes 35. The guy with the jack 7 suited gets out of the way. And this guy Jay with queen 4 off. Now that's really wide. Something you see guys like limp call with queen 4 suited. Queen 4 off is really a stretch, right? But he makes the call. And now we go and we are at $136. Turns a great card. It's a great card. It's a 5. It's not possible that he could have 5x of clubs. A 6 is probably slightly worse. Now, once in a while, sure, he could be calling and piecing off. Remember, he closed the action on the flop too. It's not like he called next to act. If he called next to act, remember it was 3 ways on the flop. If he called next to act with a guy behind him, this is even a better setup. Why do I say that? Because he's going to have less 5x if he calls next to act, even at the small stakes. Here, maybe he still can have some, but still, his hands, if he's over V-pipping like a lot of small stakes guys do, they have a lot of offsuited broadways. Queen 10, queen jack, some queen 9, in this case, queen 4. So it's going to be a lot of front door flush draws and queen X, maybe some 6X, something like that. Once in a while, like a 7-8 type of holding. There is absolutely no reason to slow down. And I'm thinking juicy here. He's got 358. If I go 100 and he calls, the pot's going to be 336. And Dylan's going to have about 250 left. I think that's a fine sizing here. He goes a little bit smaller. He goes 85. And this guy just calls without a second thought. This is one of the things I talk about. I'm not a big live tells person, but I think bet pacing and call pacing in this case are really pretty good tells. And what I'm going to say is that this doesn't seem to be like a call that I think somebody would make with 7-8. It's too quick. It could be a call with a flush draw and it could be a call with a queen. I think it kind of seems like it's a lot of times like a call with a queen. And I wouldn't think he has a big hand here either, that he's sandbagging like say 6 is full or he turned to 5, because there would be thought. The resulting action might be the same where he might call some of the time, but there would be thought. There wouldn't sort of be this in-pace flow call without thought. This seems like a weaker queen to me a lot. Or a hand like maybe 6x of clubs or some sort of, club draw, flush draw, something going, not flush draw, like an automatic call. So as long as I don't see a club here, I'm really liking life here. Once in a while, you get the jack and the 10 where you get a guy to run into 2 pair. But the pot now is 306 and the river's a 9. Hence the reason why I brought up that 7-8, right? Now he does lose to queen 9 now as well. But if you take out a larger sort of portion of that 7-8 type of holding because of the pacing, this should be 3 streets. This is a great run out. And he shaped this where I would probably be betting at least 150 to 175 here. So I was very, very happy. I don't know who this guy is, but it was, like I said, one hand in an hour. This is a great bet. Great 3-street bet here. Not going to have 7-8 all that much. And we think he's going to call with a queen. So he comes out and he bets 200. I mean, if we could pick the best hand out of these ones, this is it. And he gets called, and that's because a lot of these guys are incapable of laying down top pair. Again, it's a situation where they probably wouldn't take this hand. They don't know what polarized means, but they wouldn't take this hand for 3 streets. It can't have if he's betting here, he can't just have a queen. He should be scared of the 5. So he's either bluffing or he's got something big. Of course, that's the definition of polarized, but they don't know what the word polarized means. I will say, though, this board is paired. So even at the small stakes, people know that they can go 3 streets with aces or kings when the board's paired. But if it was say, queen 6-5 deuce 9, you'll just see guys that will never bet one pair when the board's unpaired. But if it was queen 6-5 deuce 9, it's the same bet at the end, right? It's absolutely the same bet at the end. Or queen 6-5, queen 6-5 deuce 4 would put a one-liner out there at 3. Say queen 6-5 10-4. Something like that. That would be kind of thing because you're losing to queen 10. And then you would lose to queen 4 on that example of queen 6-5 10-4, but you would just be unlucky. It's still not a bad bet. But this is a great bet. This is how you increase your win rate in small stakes live poker. Well done, Mr. D. Leon or Lion. And moving on here to the next hand. And this is something that you see quite a bit too at this level. Remember, if you are trying to play a hand like a bluff catcher and then you make something at the end, it can often be correct to continue to play it like a bluff catcher more often than to change your hand. I mean, sometimes you have to do an audible in a hand, but you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. So Joe's going to raise it up here to 19, and Gore, who did a button straddle here, makes the call with ace 10 of diamonds. So both these guys have an ace in their hand, and the board comes out ace jack 8 rainbow. And when you see super, super loose live play and a board texture is close, whether or not you want to bet or not, sometimes maybe you say, well, sometimes I'll check a weak ace on a board like this. If it's close, you should bet in a game like this because you're going to get called by any piece, especially on a 2-flush board. So I would take some boards where you might be doing checking in a lot of sort of tighter games or higher stakes games and just do more betting for value in a given situation. Joe does c-bet. He bets 25, which I think is fine. And we get a call here from Gore. Again, you could probably even size up a little bit here. I mean, the pot was... It's not a 2-flush board. The pot was 42. I think I probably would have bet 30. I mean, whatever, right? I probably would have bet 30. So you get a call here, and both of them have an ace. Pot's now 67. Go to the turn. Turn here is an 8, and it's a 8 of diamonds. So it looked like Joe checked very, very quickly. Obviously, Joe's kicker is not going to play now. But I will say, with the propensity for people calling with Jack X and Queen 10 being open-ended here, and a hand like 9-10 having a straight draw, I probably would still do a fair amount of betting here on the turn and then maybe check evaluate river. Maybe go into a check call shell on river because I'm not beating, we're going to tie with another ace. That would be the one kind of rare time where I think check calling on the river is fine to sort of pick off bluffs, although it is an ace-high board that we bet twice. So I don't think there's anything wrong with betting here again because of how light people are calling. Joe checked pretty quickly, and now Gore actually picks up the nut flush draw, and he bets 75, so he bets over the size of the pot. Now, I certainly wouldn't go anywhere if I played the hand like this if I were Joe, because this guy could have some of these bluffs there. So I am absolutely going to check call, which is what he does. So 75 and a call. And now we're at 242. And this is what I'm talking about as we get to this river. So the river's an ace. The river here is an ace. And now, obviously, Joe has a full house. Now, he doesn't have the top full house. He loses actually to ace jack. I mean, there's a couple of hands that he loses to, right? He loses to ace jack and he loses to quad 8. But what I was talking about at the beginning of the hand here is that if Joe check calls the turn because he wants to pick off some of those bluffs like 9-10 and queen 10 and he doesn't think that like Jack X is going to bet, for 75. Jack X isn't going to bet pot. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like you could make a case if the guy bet like 1/3, like if he used like a little variable turn sizing, you could make a case where he might end up with Jack X. But once he goes 75 and a 65 on the turn, he's either going to have an ace or he's going to have one of those straight draws, maybe that backed into diamond, like a diamond draw, like 9-10, queen 10, something like that. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, even though you just made a very strong hand, to change the way that you play this hand, which is playing it like a bluff catcher on the turn and now betting the river, because you're never going to get an ace to fold. Once in a while you lose, right? An ace is never folding. And if you just come out and bet, the bluffs that the guy had on the turn are just going to fold. So this is just a clear-cut situation where you got to think about the whole thing. It's not just all about like what you have in your hand. It's how the hand went down and what do I think my opponent has. And he bet 125. So he actually came out and bet 125. That's why I just thought that was just, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If the guy never has Jack X, it makes no sense. Now, another thing that you could do once in a great while, but I don't think I would do it on this board, just throw out like what we talk about, like a reverse block, like bet tiny to try to get raised. I don't think this is the board to do that on. You're not going to have a draw raise into you having a probable ace. I like to do that when I have very, very thick value hands and something changes, like a boat and top pair pairs. We talked about that, I think, last week. Or we talked about that in the Michael G hand from the podcast this week, where he had eights full and a jack came at the end, and I thought the river play was a check. Those are times you can check or throw in a reverse block. But here, throw in a reverse block. But here, I wouldn't throw in a reverse block. But this should be a check all day long. It just doesn't make any sense if the guy doesn't have Jack X. So you got to think about the whole thing. Moving along here to the next hand. And this one is actually going to be one where I want to go over where you might be able to institute a block bet correctly, a stop bet. Now, I always get on people for block betting rivers. And remember, on the river, if you're going to block bet from out of position, you have to get called by a worse hand some of the time for a block bet to be correct, because there's no reason to block if that's not the case. However, you can block effectively earlier than the river, especially on sort of a nut-changing card on the turn from out of position. I thought that this particular hand was probably a pretty good example of what you could do in terms of a block bet from out of position. So it's going to get limped around here. Yes, limped around, and there are 4 people in the pot. Small pot, no straddle out there. And it comes out 8-5-3 here with a couple of hearts. So we got another combo draw here. This time it's for Letty here with 9-6 of hearts. This is a limp pot, attacking limp pots. You know I love talking about attacking limp pots, and the approach to attacking limp pots is almost the same thing as attacking a field better. If you're new to the site, what I mean by that is when the pre-flop raiser raises and then checks the flop, and then a field better guy who flat called in the field bets the flop, you can attack that bet a lot. Same exact concept in a limp pot. If I want to play this hand for maximum fold equity and I'm first to act, I want to check raise this hand. Because if I bet out, an 8 is definitely not folding. You might not get a 5 to fold, but if you check and you get one of those hands, especially a limped pot, to bet, you have a lot more fold equity. Here he's got, against an 8, he's got a straight flush draw and an overcard. He would be like a favorite. But I want to add maximum fold equity here by throwing in a check raise. Whereas on the flip side, if I had a super nutted, very thick value hand like pocket 5s, pocket 3s, I probably would be doing a lot of betting. I can also check raise pocket 5s, pocket 3s to get more money in the pot because it's small. But that's sort of my approach. So I definitely prefer to check raise here as opposed to lead out. So he's going to bet out 6. You can see a 5 calls. This is exactly what I was talking about. A 3 calls. And now Jay over here, he's flop top 2. So Jay here has flop top 2, and he's going to raise it up straight away. So he raises it up here. Obviously, if Letty had check raise, he might have even gotten 3-bet on the flop, but you don't know that a guy's going to have like 5-8 here in a given situation. So I think for Letty here, the play is to call. I suppose you could make a case, looking at the stack sizes, you could make a case here if you thought that there was some fold equity to bet 3-bet this hand. And the reason why you might want to bet 3-bet this hand is because you want to get higher flush draws out. I'm just saying from all the hands that I reviewed, I don't think there's ever a raise fold button here for Jay. Like, I just don't think he's ever raising the flop and then folding, which kind of lends me towards thinking that bet 3-betting is bad. But there is something to be said for getting the riffraff out of the hand in between, where you get a higher flush draw out, or you get a hand like 9-8 out, something like that, where you can hit a card where it wouldn't have, that would have given somebody 2-pair and then you have top pair. But of course you have to beat Jay here too. So I would probably do a lot of calling here for the reasons I talked about. So he makes the call. This guy, I don't know what this guy's doing. He calls here with Jack 5. The other guy's out of there with the Ace 3. So there are 3 ways now. 3 ways to the turn, 104. Turn here is an ace. This is actually quite interesting. And it changes things a little bit because there is a third guy in here. If you sort of pretend that this guy's out of the hand, this guy Carson, I think it's a little clearer for you to see. But based upon what just happened here, I think this might be a card where I might come out and block the turn. And what I mean by that is that a straight comes in here with deuce 4, and we're in the small blind, and that could be a hand once in a while that we lead with. So if Jay had a set, or he had like 2-pair like he has, if you come out and block, like say, and you bet 40 or 50, and it works, you've kind of set your price. You've set your price, and you prevent the 2-pair plus hand from actually betting really large. The other interesting thing about the ace here too is that if Jay doesn't have a set, if he has exactly what he has in the form of like 2-pair, like 5-3 or 8-5, he's going to be even less likely to ever raise the turn because you could have made aces up now. So it's not just deuce 4, it's aces up that's possible. It changes, like I said, it changes things a little bit because Carson's in there, but I actually think that this might be a spot if I had played the hand this way where I might throw out a block. I very well might throw out a block here for those reasons. Instead, he checks. And again, there's really no reason for Jay to stop betting. Jay bets 50, and it's a very easy call here for Letty getting 3-1. And at this point, you just hope that Carson is out of the hand. Now, could you throw in a check raise here on the turn as well? You could, but again, I would find it pretty hard to believe that in a limped pot, a guy who raised the flop, got 2 callers, and then continued to bet on an ace turn is going to fold to a check raise. Like, he's going to have a minimum of 2-pair. A minimum of 2-pair for the most part. Then again, once again, like you could actually be up against like higher hearts, which would suck in a given situation as well. Time for Carson to eject. I don't know why he's really pondering this one with 5x, but he is going to finally get out of here. We go to the river, and the river here is a 5. And obviously Letty just misses, and Jay's going to bet for value, and Letty's just going to fold. But I thought I wanted to bring that one up about that. Thought that might be a really good example of when you might utilize a block bet in a given situation. All right, a few more hands here. This is, again, kind of a similar type of thing where I think this guy, I just can't stress this enough, got lost on how he was trying to really play his hand. This is Letty he's going to limp in with ace 4 hearts. That's one of the hands where I thought, okay, sometimes you can limp in on a loose live game, small pairs, things like that. The reason why sometimes it's okay to limp with that hand is, again, if you're raising and you're getting 5 or 6 callers, it's going to be difficult sort of to play through. Kind of similar to a small pair, and you let some of the suited garbage come into play here too. But we do get a raise here from Gore from the cutoff. Gore raises it up here to 15, and this guy had over-limped with 5, which I think is fine too, and then we're going to get calls. So we're going to go 4 ways here. And the board comes out ace king 3 with a couple of hearts. So ace king 3 with a couple of hearts. Now that's a big flop here for Letty, but it's not as big as you think. Top pair and a flush draw on a board where the pre-flop raiser, where the board hits the pre-flop raiser, is definitely not as big as you think, and I would definitely play this one passively. I mean, you're behind to ace queen, ace jack, he can have ace king. I mean, obviously I'm going to be in there, but if the pre-flop raiser is driving this hand, I'm going to kind of play it like a draw. like a call without fold equity. And it's better than just like a dry draw because you can go call. And if the pre-flop raiser doesn't have an ace after you've gone call, a lot of times it's going to he's going to give up and you're going to win. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. So it's definitely one that I'm going to put in a sort of a check call type of situation, in a given situation. So it does get checked over here to Gore. Gore makes a very bad c-bet here on this texture into 3 people, but again, it's not really surprising, just with absolutely nothing here. I mean, I suppose you could say, against like maybe 2 people, we go back to that whole thing on ace-king boards where if the players are always 3-betting ace-king, aces and kings, you can actually barrel off quite a bit on an ace-king board because they're not going to really have strong hands. And a lot of times, if they don't raise off by the turn, they don't have a set of 3s. And they're not going to have ace-king as a pre-flop. So if you had a hand like 7-8 of clubs, maybe once in a while I could get on board with an actual triple barrel. But usually you're not going to win a ton of money trying to bluff somebody off an ace in this game. Just a little kind of a thought. I don't know what Jay was doing in there in the hand, but he was in there. So again, this is just going to be played here as a check call. I mean, this should just be played as a check call. So 42 and a call here from Letty really isn't anything else to do. So now the pot is $146. Move to the turn. Turn here is a 5, which again gives Letty even extra equity here as he picks up a gut shot. But you can see the check mark. So it's like one of these things where if you have some showdown value, this is here my approach to a draw with showdown value. If you have some showdown value, which he does, I mean, he has better than some showdown value. I mean, this is top pair and a flush draw. But if you have a pair with some showdown value, you shouldn't be taking that hand as a semi-bluff at anywhere near the frequency than like if you had like queen 10 of hearts here or some sort of hand that had no showdown value whatsoever. 4-6 of hearts, something like that. Because what I was about to say is that he is going to check. And once in a while, if the pre-flop raiser bet, you could make a case of semi-bluffing this type of holding. But on this texture, it would be very, very bad. Number one, for the reasons I talked about with ace-4, which has some showdown value. But I don't even know if I'd be doing it with a combo draw anyways. I mean, we can see even a huge draw. It's a 3-bet pot. Gore was the one, or excuse me, it was a single raise pot, but he bet on the flop and on the turn. And a lot of times you're not going to have fold equity. I think it's okay. I take that back. In a single raise pot, for some reason I thought this was a 3-bet pot. In a single raise pot, it could be okay to do this with like 4-6 of hearts. But if this was like a true blue 3-bet pot, you don't want to be semi-bluffing on an ace-king board when it's going to smack the pre-flop raiser's range all that much. This is a single raise pot. You have ace-4 of hearts. But even still, he doesn't really seem like the type of guy that's going to be folding out ace-queen, ace-jack. Here's the thing. Like if you thought there was fold equity against ace-queen, ace-jack, you could make this play. And the point that I'm making is I would rather do it with no showdown value as a check raise here on the turn, like 4-6 of hearts, than do it with ace-4 of hearts that might win at the end unimproved. So I would not probably take this one and semi-bluff with it because we had the ace. Now, if we had queen-4 of hearts or something like that, that's all good. But Gore bet on the flop into multi-way action, and now he's betting again on the turn. And again, I would just take this one as a check call. Check call all day long. So the river here is 366. Now the river here is a 3. And now my question here is Letty playing this hand like a bluff catcher, right? Absolutely, he is. Now he gets protected here by the fact that a 3 pairs, meaning that as long as Gore doesn't have ace-king or ace-5 or something better, he's going to chop. Like he's going to chop with like ace-queen, ace-jack, something like that. But there would be absolutely no reason to come out here and bet if you thought that Gore didn't have like a king. I mean, the only reason to come out and bet would be making this gigantic assumption that Gore was betting a king twice and would call because front door hearts bricked out. You want to give the guy, I mean, I'm going to check and evaluate here. And sometimes I might even get bluffed off the hand. Like if I checked and then Gore like fired again, it would be close. It'd be like, is this guy capable of like triple barreling off, right? But there's no reason to come out and bet. Why bet? Why bet? Think about the whole situation. Now, again, we can obviously see the cards, but still, you're never going to get an ace to fold. This is making the assumption you're never going to get an ace to fold. He doesn't have a king. So you check and you allow his bluffs to bet sometimes. And then he's going to check back with a lot of other, say like ace X, but you're never going to get called by worse. That's for sure. And he's going to have some occasional bluffing frequency. So the play has to be to check there. It just doesn't make any sense. A couple more hands here. Move on here to the next hand. Comes from 3 hours and 22 minutes into this particular episode. And this is a situation where this guy, D. Leon, raises it up with ace-5 suited from up front. And again, multiple callers. So we're going to go 5 ways in a straddle pot. Pot's $86. Or it's $102, excuse me. $102 here. And the board is going to come out 10-3 deuce. So ace-5 suited is probably not going to be good enough here to c-bet, I don't think, into 3 other people. Maybe once in a while, if you had a really good image with the backdoor, you could get away with it. But I don't mind the check here at all in this spot. Now you can see that Evan here in the cutoff has top pair. And you would expect that hand to bet a lot. Like if I'm going to call a raise with queen 10 and he gets checked to me from the pre-flop raiser, I'm going to bet. You're just losing value. Protection, losing value. He checks, which is quite odd. And now Jay here is going to bet here with the deuce and a backdoor diamond draw. Pretty ambitious bet, pretty ambitious pre-flop call, obviously. But it is going to get everybody out. I don't think it's actually a terrible bet. You're going to get better hands to fold, like 6s, 5s, and you do have some backdoors. So it's not a terrible bet, really. And like I said, I wouldn't have really expected Evan to have a 10 here all that much. Now, D line, like I said, it's pretty close. I mean, a wheel is a 4, and he could obviously be good here with an ace, and it's a button bet. So I might make this call. I wouldn't expect this guy to really be relevant. You say, well, we're not heads up. Don't you have to call tighter? That's true. But if you look at the setup, we were the pre-flop raiser and we checked, and this guy checks. So most of the time, he's going to check fold. So it's not a terrible spot in assuming that you're going to get heads up. So I don't mind that call there. Now, if somebody else had called, it starts to get way more hairy. But Evan does check call. Interesting, right? So $222 to the turn. Turn's a deuce. Turn here is a deuce. Great spot there for Jay. By the way, if the turn is something else and I'm Jay, I'm probably taking a card quite a bit. Although if it was a disconnected high card, it would be kind of interesting. But Evan's hand is definitely, I would say, disguised here for sure. Now, obviously, D Lion here is going to get out of the hand. And Evan, as played, should call. It's a pretty small bet here. I mean, the guy bet 40 into 220 here. He's trying to rope him in. It's quite obvious. Evan makes the call. And now we're at a $302. And we move to the river. And the river here is a king. And the reason why I picked this one up, and I think this is actually going to be the last hand, is because of hand reading. And obviously, we can see the cards. But this is once again an example of a high disconnected run out. So we got a field call. So again, it's really hard for me to sort of put myself in Evan's spot because I probably wouldn't have played it this way. But we check called with the 10, second to last to act on the flop. The guy continued to bet with a deuce on the turn, and now the river is a king. And now we check. Now, a lot of times it's going to go check. We're going to chop it up with a 10. Maybe we got a little bit unlucky and we had him out kicked, but he checks. And Jay is going to bet here again. And he bets 120. And my question to you is, what is he betting? What is he betting? Now, sometimes you will see someone bet a 10 here because they think that, their kicker is like somewhat protected with the king. But I would call as played 100% of the time here from Evan. And the reason why I'm saying what is he betting is that it's fairly polarized here. Well, first of all, you're going to chop with a 10 anyway, so it doesn't matter unless you're up against ace 10. Ace 10's not going to bet. So I just think people just check back so much. I know I said sometimes you might run into somebody that thinks that they're protected, but it's a small stakes live game, right? So most 10s are going to check back. You've got a disconnected high run. You're even going to have guys who are betting the king high flush draw check back. Here, people are showdown monkeys on the river. So by definition, going back to like week 1, this is a polarized spot. I would call with almost any showdown value. I might call with a 3 here. I know the hand is set up differently, but I just want you to get in sort of the headspace. When you get a disconnected higher run out where it shuts down all the betting from top pair, and the guy's range is going to be draws or top pair when he goes bet on flop and on turn, and he continues to bet on an overcard at the end, and a lot of times he's not even betting if he hits the overcard with the king X of hearts, you have to call with any type of showdown value. You have to call. And again, it is, kind of a quite a polar spot here. So I'm snap calling, and that's exactly what Evan did. He did snap call. So that's going to wrap it up for us this week, guys, in this little 2-part episode. Thank you guys very much for being subscribers, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.